Frank Sinatra spent the last 36 years of his life carrying a secret about Marilyn Monroe that he never fully told the public. He told it to one person in private, and the man he told it to kept it for another 2 decades after Sinatra died, before finally deciding the world deserved to know. What Sinatra believed about Marilyn Monroe's death, who he thought was responsible, and what Marilyn had told him in confidence before she died, rewrites the story most people think they know about the most famous death in Hollywood history. To understand what Sinatra knew, you first have to understand what he and Marilyn actually were to each other, because the public version of their relationship has always been incomplete. When Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe first crossed paths properly in 1953, both of them were at turning points. Marilyn had just lit up screens in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and was becoming the most photographed woman on the planet. Sinatra had just won an Oscar for From Here to Eternity, after a career collapse so severe that most of Hollywood had written him off entirely. They recognized something in each other immediately, a loneliness that fame had made worse rather than better, and a need to be understood by someone who did not want anything from them. What followed was a 7-year relationship that both of them went to considerable lengths to keep out of the press. They met in borrowed apartments and remote lodges. They refused to be photographed together publicly. When their names did appear in the same sentence, both camps denied everything. Author Edward Z. Epstein, who wrote the book Frank and Marilyn, described it as a relationship intentionally kept out of the public eye, and noted that they had a great deal in common and understood each other in ways their other partners never did. The nature of that relationship has been disputed ever since. Some biographers, including J. Randy Taraborelli, claim they began a romantic affair in 1954, shortly after both their marriages collapsed, Marilyn filing for divorce from Joe DiMaggio in October of that year, and Sinatra separating from Ava Gardner around the same time. Taraborelli alleged that Sinatra even considered asking Marilyn to marry him in the weeks before her death, with a friend quoted as saying no one will mess with her if she is Mrs. Frank Sinatra. Entertainment journalist Charles Cassillo went further, writing that Sinatra had fallen genuinely in love with her and had gone to his own lawyer saying he intended to propose, only to be talked out of it. His lawyer's reason for talking him out of it was chilling. She is going to commit suicide, the lawyer told him. And if she kills herself while she is Frank Sinatra's wife, you will go down in history as the man responsible for Marilyn Monroe's death. Sinatra's closest confidant tells a different story entirely, and this is where the private version of events begins to diverge sharply from everything that had been reported before. Tony Opidisano served as Sinatra's manager and road manager for decades, joining his circle when he was just 21 years old and remaining one of the few people Sinatra truly trusted until his death in 1998. After keeping his silence for 20 years following Sinatra's passing, Opidisano published a memoir in 2021 called Sinatra and Me. In the wee small hours, and the Marilyn chapter of it stopped people cold. Opidisano was unequivocal on one thing: Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe were never lovers. He said Sinatra had told him directly Frank felt she was too troubled, too fragile, for him to sleep with and then walk away. Opidisano wrote, he had a special place in his heart for Marilyn, and he felt she was a fragile girl who had been exploited by a lot of people. That is part of the reason why he said, even though as pretty as she was, as attracted as I was to her, I just could not bring myself to go there physically. She even tried to pursue him, Opidisano said, and Sinatra refused. He cared about her too much. He did not want to be another older man who appeared to take advantage of her and then leave her flat. What he was instead, Opidisano revealed, was the one person Marilyn Monroe trusted with the truth about the most dangerous secrets of her life. Marilyn was deeply involved with two of the most powerful men in the world at the same time, President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy. Both affairs were conducted in the utmost secrecy. Both ended abruptly, in the way that powerful men end things with women they no longer need, without explanation and without warning. And when they ended, Marilyn did not go to a therapist or a publicist or a close girlfriend. She went to Frank. Marilyn told Frank she did not understand why they had shut her out completely once she stopped having sex with them, Opidisano wrote. She was not a political threat to them. She was not planning to expose them. She was a woman who had genuinely believed these relationships meant something, and she was bewildered and devastated to discover they had not. Sinatra was the man she called when she was confused and frightened and alone. He listened. He kept her secrets. And from what he heard, he began to piece together a picture of Marilyn's final weeks that convinced him she had not died accidentally. The weekend before her death in August 1962, Marilyn was at the Calneva Lodge near Lake Tahoe, a resort that Sinatra partially owned. Oppiedisano revealed something about that weekend that had never been made fully public before. Marilyn was there with Joe DiMaggio, the baseball legend who had never stopped loving her, had rekindled their relationship, and the two were quietly planning to remarry. Marilyn was going to announce it publicly at a press conference the following week. That press conference is the detail that haunted Sinatra for the rest of his life, because word got out that she was planning it, and almost immediately, rumors began spreading that Marilyn was not going to announce her reunion with DiMaggio. People began saying she was going to reveal what she knew about the Kennedys. Sinatra was clear on this point, Oppiedisano wrote. Frank said she would never have spilled about the Kennedys because she still had feelings for Jack. She had no intention of exposing anyone. But the rumor was already out there, and once it was out there, it could not be contained. Marilyn Monroe died on August 4, 1962. The Los Angeles police concluded that her death was caused by a self-administered overdose of sedative drugs and ruled it a probable suicide. She was found lying face down on her bed, a telephone in one hand, empty pill bottles scattered around the room. She was 36 years old. Within days of her death, Sinatra's own attorney Mickey Rudin, who had also worked with Monroe, told Sinatra directly that he believed she had been killed. That same story was circulating among the associates of mob boss Sam Giancana, some of whom were claiming involvement. From multiple separate sources, Sinatra heard the same specific detail repeated. She had been murdered with a Nembutol suppository, and Robert Kennedy or the mob was involved. He did not hear this once. He heard it from several sources, each arriving at the same conclusion independently. Sinatra believed it. He believed it completely, and he believed it for the remaining 36 years of his life. Frank believed she was murdered, Oppiedisano wrote, and he never got over it. What he did with that belief is the part that tells you the most about the kind of man Frank Sinatra was. He said nothing publicly. He gave no interviews about it. He made no accusations and filed no complaints. He kept Marilyn's secrets the same way he had always kept them, quietly, privately, the way he had kept everything she had told him when she was alive. He had powerful enemies, connections to the mob himself that made speaking out about Kennedy-linked violence a genuinely dangerous undertaking, and a fundamental code that said certain things were not for public consumption, so he carried it alone. He tried to attend her funeral. Joe DiMaggio, who had already taken over arrangements for Marilyn's burial, barred Sinatra from entering Westwood Memorial Park. DiMaggio had blamed the Rat Pack crowd, and Sinatra specifically, for introducing Marilyn to the Kennedy Circle and to the world that eventually consumed her. The two men, who had once been friends, never reconciled. DiMaggio had flowers delivered to Marilyn's grave twice a week for the next 20 years, until his own death in 1999. The baseball legend was heard to say before he died, "Tell them if it wasn't for them, she would still be here." The them he was referring to was never entirely clarified. Sinatra died in May 1998 at the age of 82, taking most of what he knew with him. He had spent his final years in declining health, his memory fading, his voice weakened, the great instrument of his life slowly going quiet. But in the wee small hours of countless nights over the preceding decades, he had talked to Oppiedisano about Marilyn, about what she had told him, about what had happened to her, and about the press conference that he believed had signed her death warrant before she ever stepped in front of a microphone. Oppiedisano kept those conversations to himself for 20 more years after Sinatra was gone, until he felt enough time had passed and enough of the people involved were no longer alive to be hurt by the truth. He published his memoir in 2021 and said of his decision to finally share it, "I think Frank knew someday I would share the stories he wanted the world to know." The official conclusion of Marilyn Monroe's death has never changed. The 1962 ruling of probable suicide was reviewed by the Los Angeles Police Department in 1982, and no credible evidence of murder was found. The coroner's report, the toxicology, the physical evidence at the scene, all of it supported an overdose. None of what Sinatra believed has ever been proven, and Oppidisano himself acknowledged it plainly. Conspiracy theories abound, and I cannot lay them to rest. But what Sinatra believed is not really the point, or at least it is not the whole point. The point is what Marilyn told him, and how she felt, and what the last weeks of her life actually looked like to the one person she trusted enough to tell the truth. She was not suicidal, he believed. She was planning a future. She was going to remarry the man who had never stopped loving her. She was going to step in front of cameras and tell the world something hopeful, and then she was dead at 36, and the press conference never happened. And the man who knew her best spent the next 3.5 decades convinced that the announcement at that press conference was what had killed her. Whether he was right is a question history has not answered. But Frank Sinatra, who had seen almost everything that power and fame and the American century could produce, died believing he knew what happened to Marilyn Monroe. And for 36 years, he never said a word.